A warm welcome to Eye on Africa. I'm Rochelle Ferguson-Biahi. These are the top stories on the continent. Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou, remains on lockdown after deadly coordinated attacks. Armed men attacked the French embassy and suicide car bombing then caused a blast at a military headquarters. Today's assault is just the latest to hit Burkina Faso, but the country has suffered two major attacks in the last 2 years. We asked why the Sahel nation is being targeted. But first, Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou, is on lockdown tonight after deadly coordinated attacks. The country's president, Chika Oduah, says 8 people have been killed. Other sources close to the police have put the death toll at far higher. Well, heavy gunfire broke out at mid-morning. Then armed men attacked the French embassy. A suicide car bombing then caused a deadly blast at a military headquarters. Julia Kim has details.
A coordinated attack in the heart of Ouagadougou. At around 10 a.m., several men got out of a car and started shooting at passerbys before heading towards the French embassy.
4 to 6 people came out of the car. They came out and they started to shoot.
One of the men was shooting at the embassy wall, where the guardhouse is. He was shooting at the police station there.
At the same time, a massive explosion rang out near the headquarters of the armed forces, less than 1 kilometer away. More gunshots were heard as thick clouds of black smoke obscured the skies of the Burkinabe's capital. Special security forces were deployed at both sites in an attempt to neutralize the attackers. An assault by government troops on the French embassy, in which several attackers were killed, ended at around 2 p.m., according to an official statement. No group has so far claimed responsibility for the double attack, but Burkinabe officials said they were treating the incidents as acts of terrorism.
Well, for more on today's attack, Paul Melly is an Associate Fellow of the Africa Programme at Chatham House. Earlier I asked him why Burkina Faso is proving a target.
Part of this is just a reflection of the wider scale of jihadist activity across West Africa, in the Sahelian states, but even stretching down to Côte d'Ivoire. There was an attack in Grand Bassam near Abidjan, and of course there have been attacks in Bamako as well. But there's also a more local factor, because the previous government of Burkina Faso, under President Blaise Compaoré, was perceived as having really very good connections, if you like, in the Sahara, and was sort of quite well equipped to read the region, whereas the new democratic government that followed the democratic revolution of 2014 is, of course, much more focused on practicalities of development and domestic politics, and has really had to make a big adjustment to prepare itself to cope with this sort of terrorist situation, this terrorist challenge. And it doesn't necessarily have perhaps the same degree of connections and understanding of the region, at least to start off with. Now it's worked very hard. It's built up specialist anti-terrorist forces. We could see them in the television coverage today. And even the previous attack was much better handled than the very first one in 2016. And today, although tragically there have, of course, been casualties, we can see that as far as we know, the casualties have largely been confined to the security forces, and trained elite troops have moved in very quickly. So Burkina Faso is raising its game, it's strengthening its approach, but it's a hugely difficult challenge.
Well, I mean, staying with that approach, Burkina Faso is, of course, a part of the G5 Sahel joint force, which has been tasked essentially in dealing with extremism, with insurgent groups within the region. I suppose a two-pronged question: what can they do to stop it, and are they able to do so?
Well, it's a dual challenge, really. The strength of the G5 force will be to work in the frontier areas, and particularly the so-called region of the 3 frontiers, which is where the borders of Burkina Faso, Niger and Mali converge. In other words, rural areas where you need to work with rural communities to understand what's going on, but you're largely dealing with a sort of semi-military type of situation. It's very difficult to counter urban terrorism. After all, we've seen numerous attacks in Western cities, in Paris, in Brussels, in London, in Barcelona. If you have a small number of very determined individuals who are prepared to lose their lives in the attempt, without transforming a country, without transforming a capital city into a sort of security lockdown on a permanent basis, it's very, very difficult to protect against these kind of attacks by small groups of armed men that can't be predicted. Of course, you can enhance security on individual buildings and have a careful think, could you improve procedures for approaching prestige government buildings or foreign embassies or whatever. But basically, there isn't really very much you can do other than good intelligence to tackle terrorism when it's staged in urban areas.
In other news on the continent, local officials in northern DR Congo say clashes between Hema herders and Lendu farmers in Ituri province have killed more than 40 people this Friday. Well, this after tensions flared over land disputes. It's the second such incident in a month now. In January, 30 people were killed. Unrest between the two groups have largely remained dormant since the 1998 to 2003 war, when thousands died in fighting between the two groups. Kenyan authorities say 5 policemen were killed this Friday in an attack by suspected jihadists near the Somali border. The officers died when the assailants raided police camps in Mandera County in northwest Kenya. The attackers then, according to reports, fled to the border. No one's claimed responsibility for the attack, but Mandera suffered a spate of bombings by the Somalia-based group Al-Shabaab last year. Prosecutors in Angola say they've launched an inquiry into possible corruption at the state oil giant Sonangol, which was run by the ex-president José Eduardo dos Santos' daughter, Isabel. Well, this week, Sonangol's new chief executive openly criticised the financial management of its predecessor, Isabel dos Santos. Isabel was appointed to run the company back in June 2016. She was removed from the job last year by Angola's new president, João Lourenço. Ethiopia's parliament has voted to approve a state of emergency imposed after the abrupt resignation of Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn last month. Ethiopia is experiencing its worst political turmoil following nearly 3 years of anti-government demonstrations. The state of emergency bans protest and restricts publications that could be deemed to incite violence. Votes against the bill, though, have exposed rifts within the ruling coalition. More than 80 legislators oppose the bill, saying it encroaches on fundamental freedom of the people. Well, residents in Addis Ababa are divided over the move.
I don't believe the proclamation is necessary at this point. On one hand, the government is saying it is releasing prisoners to widen the democratic sphere. On the other hand, it is declaring a state of emergency. I think this will restrict freedom of expression, and I believe it is of no use to the nation.
I am happy it passed. I am happy because it will guarantee our peace and unity. I'm happy because it will resolve the illegal activities. And this should have happened sooner, so that maybe the problems wouldn't have occurred in the first place.
That's it from your Eye on Africa team. More international headlines coming up here on France 24. Stay tuned.